Hey everyone, have you wanted to source books and figure out which books are profitable, which books make sense to send into Amazon? Well, we've got the show for you. Welcome to the Prof Sales YouTube channel. I am Prof Sales, and this channel is all about being in business for yourself, being an entrepreneur, being a reseller, selling on platforms like eBay and Amazon and so on, and just a positive little niche here of YouTube. And tonight I have my friend, a very special guest on, Caleb Roth. Caleb, how you doing?
I'm great. Jason, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Caleb, if you don't know, and if you're living under a book-selling rock, and I say book-selling rock, then Caleb is actually well known in the book-selling community for lots of things, really. Being a creator of ScoutIQ, there's a cool spreadsheet he has that helps you track book sales. But before he did all that, he was actually gotten into selling books in kind of a big way. I've listened to a couple podcasts, watched a few videos that he's been in over the past several months. And he's definitely been somebody who's helped mentor me from afar, even though he didn't know it, to help my book selling journey. So I'm excited about the show tonight. If you guys have wanted to sell books and you haven't known how to get started, you don't know really what makes a book a good book, or those sorts of things, we're going to talk about those things. He's going to walk through some stuff that I've been doing. I'm going to share some of my journey with him, and he can give me his feedback. We haven't rehearsed this, so this is not scripted, and so it's just going to be, kind of off the cuff a little bit. But if you have questions and so on, leave them in the chat. Leave a question after this video post if you want to. Either Caleb or myself will do our best to answer it if we can. And we're just glad you guys are here. So having said all that, let me turn it over to my guest, Caleb, and let him explain a little bit about who he is and how he got into this role of, I guess, being a bookseller. Would that be accurate, Caleb?
Absolutely. So yeah, like I said, Jason, thanks for having me. And I've shared my story a lot on other platforms and other interviews, so I won't go deep into the weeds there. You guys, if you're new to my story and you want to hear it, jump on over and you can just search Caleb Roth on YouTube, and a lot of stories will come up as well. But I had a corporate gig, always had an itch and a yearning to be an entrepreneur, and kind of jumped in out of college. Figured I'd put the college degree to good use, and went and got a job working for an orthopedic company. And about 5 years later, 6 years later, I decided, you know what, it's time to really explore being an entrepreneur. But I'm a chicken, I'm a sissy. People think that you have to have a huge risk tolerance to be an entrepreneur, and that's just not the case. So my wife and I sat down and said, hey, let's figure out what can we do on the side to start building sort of a side hustle, a side income, and let's just see what happens. We knew books, we dabbled in books before, we'd sold on eBay, we'd sold on Amazon, all of that just as hobbies or small times in life, selling textbooks in college, going to garage sales in high school, whatever it was. But we just came back to books and said, okay, let's just map out a plan. Let's say, hey, let's find 100 books a week. We kind of set that goal and we mapped it out. We said, we'll find 100 books the first week. We'll sell 2 or 3 of them. That's not life-changing. It probably barely pays for our coffee habits, but that's a start. Week 2, we find another 100. Now we're selling 4 or 5 or 6 a week. And we sort of mapped that out over 9 to 12 months and said, wait a minute, if this actually works, we were just guessing. There wasn't a lot of information at the time. We just guessed and said, hey, we think we can sell 2 to 3% a week. Turns out it's actually a little bit higher than that. And over the course of a year, that sort of snowballed into, it wasn't replacing our income, but it was getting us close to replacing our expenses. And at that point, we both stepped away, or I stepped away from my full-time gig, and my wife followed about 6 months later. So that's kind of the story of how we got into it. Books are sort of the gateway into Amazon. They're sort of the gateway drug. It's very easy to get into. The margins are great. They can be addictive. That's all the drug references I have. And most people start with books and then, branch into other things, other categories, toys, kitchen, apparel, what have you, or they get into other categories or other sourcing methodologies like wholesale or online arbitrage. We've stayed strictly books. I think there's a lot of value in going deep and understanding a niche and a category and building relationships. And so that's been our strategy. And to this day, several years later, our business is still, I would say, 99.5% books.
Man, that's so good. And you said something there right at the end that people who watch this channel will be very familiar with, a niche. We've forever said on this channel that, find niches that you can really master, maybe not master, but at least know a tremendous amount about, It speeds you up. It's much more efficient. You make better decisions rather than trying to kind of sell everything that comes across your path, which is more time consuming. But that's probably a very common story about a lot of people who sell on Amazon. And I think, a lot of people who watch this channel are coming maybe from the eBay world, had more experience with eBay, and some have had some experience with Amazon. But one of the things that I hear a lot from people who want to sell on Amazon or have sold is they say, well, it's kind of difficult, or I don't understand the fees, or so on. I mean, would it be fair to say, though, that selling books as far as a product on Amazon is probably about seemingly as simple as it gets?
It's fairly easy. There's not a lot of product prep. In fact, almost no prep required. You're not putting books in poly bags. You're not usually trying to clean up the books too much. They're also incredibly easy to research because most of them have a barcode or an ISBN on the back cover. And if not, you can open the title page and find it there. So researching the books are fairly easy. Prepping them is fairly easy. They can get heavy in quantity. Filling your car with books, it does take a little bit of effort to lift them. But you can fit 40 or 50 books in a box and ship them to Amazon. So from a prep perspective, from a research perspective, to a storage requirement, I mean, if you're going to even hold books in your house, I mean, I've got plenty of room in here just for several bookshelves. You can build a medium-sized inventory in a garage if you wanted. So books are fairly easy in the grand scheme of things versus toys where you've got to polybag certain ones and try and wedge them into boxes. Books are also durable. You can fill a box with them. I hardly put any extra, packaging supplies in there. And if the box gets dropped, it's going to be just fine. Books are really rugged.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the things that I've always been an advocate for when you're trying to figure out what to sell, if you want to get into this reselling game, is you need to niche down. You need to find something that's readily available in your area. You need to find something that you can get cheaply, especially if you can get it in quantity, because that's going to make your capital dollar stretch a lot further, and something that doesn't take a tremendous amount of space. And I kind of think wouldn't you say books kind of checks off all those categories? I mean, books are kind of everywhere, right? I mean, we're kind of swimming in books. Yeah,
books are everywhere. Most people view them as junk. I mean, you can go into almost anybody's house and find several shelves worth and say, hey, are you using these regularly? No. Well, why do you have them? Well, I just haven't bothered to throw them away, or I thought I'd use my college textbooks later. And so most people view them as a nuisance and a headache. And if you get good at identifying which ones are worthwhile, you can actually profit off of what most people don't want.
Yeah. Yeah. That was sort of the same thing I found with, jeans and so on, which was, when I first started this channel, I was selling a lot of jeans. So, but yeah, books have been, definitely have checked off all those boxes for me, at least. I'm sure they do for a lot of people watching this now. But let's move into talking about the actual sourcing of them, because you and I had mentioned that as a topic when we first started talking about this show. And we might use the term sourcing or scouting, which are pretty interchangeable in your mind, right, Caleb? I mean,
sure.
Virtually the same thing.
Yep.
So let me ask you this. So, and Caleb doesn't know any of these questions. They're not bad or anything, but I usually send him to him. I was like, man, I knew I forgot to do something. But let me ask you, and this is kind of a, go with this wherever you feel it needs to go. But what's your personal philosophy behind what makes a book profitable and worth selling versus one that is not? Because, I mean, you could argue, right, that every book potentially will sell for some amount of money in some period of time, potentially. But what for you actually makes it profitable and worth, all the things that go into it versus not?
It's a deep question, or that could go in a number of different directions. So let's go a couple different directions with it, and then we can kind of fine tune where you're thinking. So almost any book can be sold. It depends on where you're trying to sell it, what your goals are. Are you, did you buy books by the truckload, and are you trying to offload as many as possible? Are you a cherry picker, i.e., are you going to a thrift store or a sale and just trying to pick out the winners and sell them online? If so, that's what you got to do. Are you trying to focus on your profit per book, or are you more interested in how many books you can bring home? All that's going to dictate what your strategies are and what your rules are. I'm assuming, for the sake of argument here, that we're talking about books that you can sell on Amazon.
Right.
Is that right? Okay. Because you can certainly package up books into categories of kids books, for example, and sell those locally on Facebook or Craigslist or even on eBay. But for me, I'm more of a technical analyst. You can be a technical analyst or a fundamental one. It's kind of a stock trading term. Technical analyst just looks at the numbers. What's the current price? What's the sales rank? What's the E-score? What's the historical sales? And you make a decision based on solely just based on the data. The fundamental analyst is going to look at the actual book and say, hey, does this book, does this subject, does this topic, does this author have intrinsic value on its own? And is the value going to come back? For me, I'm going to always err to look at the data. I'm a mathematical guy. I like numbers. I'm a spreadsheet junkie. And so I'd rather look at the data that's there and then try and make decisions about which ones to buy and which ones to leave behind.
Yeah, and I think, with that question too, and you didn't quite touch on this point, and maybe this will refine a little bit. We talk a lot about on this channel what your time is worth, because you can sell so many things, you can go in so many different directions, but is it worth the time you're going to put into it? And sometimes the energy and capital it goes into it too, but that's more of a mathematical equation, right? You can talk about return on investment or the margin, but what makes a book sort of worth it for you to pick up and sell? Once you've established that it is sellable on Amazon, what sort of makes it worth it for you? I mean, I guess someone gets into sort of the, how fast is it going to sell? How slow is it going to sell, for how much, and so on. But is there kind of like a mental calculus you're doing, or is it just a very by the numbers approach? Or do you ever have to kind of sometimes go on your gut because the numbers are conflicting and confusing, and it's hard to kind of make heads or tails of it?
All of the above. So
Nice.
as a general rule, let's just step back for a minute and look at the theoretical aspect of it. As a general rule, the faster a book is going to turn, the more likely it is to sell, the lower profit I'm willing to accept on it. So if I've got a book with a great sales rank, 10,000 rank, the E-score is 150 or higher, like it's selling every single day, I'm going to go, hey, I can make $1 or $2. I'm happy to do that. It's almost guaranteed. The market's not going to move quickly. The price isn't going to drop. It's not likely to anyway. And so I'm willing to accept very little margin. On the other end of the category, long tail books, books that are ranked 3, 4, 5 million, E-score is 0 or 1. They haven't sold very often. They're not likely to sell. I'm not looking for $1 profit on those books or a $2 profit. I'm looking for a $30 or $40 or $50 profit to justify the effort, because it's probably going to sit there for a while. And so no matter where, like, I know a lot of people when they come in, they want to just have one rule. I want less than 1 million rank, and I want to sell it for $12 or higher. And that's okay. It's okay starting out, but I think it's important to understand why you're setting those rules. And so for me, if the rank is really good, I'm willing to accept low profits. If as the rank gets worse, my profit threshold goes up. And as we get into the long tail, I'm looking for home runs.
Right. And obviously, if you're using Amazon FBA, sending them in, the storage fees and things like that become a factor as well. So getting more profit for a longer tail book sort of makes sense, because it's probably going to set for a few months and you're going to incur some fees.
And it's going to take longer to sell. So assuming you pay the same, let's say all your inventory costs $1 a piece, would you rather tie up in your dollars in inventory that's going to sit for 6 months, or inventory that's going to sit for 6 weeks?
Right.
You have to have a mix. And I like having a mix of both, because every day we get sales of stuff that we sourced 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago. And those are just nice little bonuses. We'd already written it off. We expected it not to sell. And so if it eventually does, that's a nice little gift.
Yeah. And it's nice with books too, like you mentioned, with some of the sales rank and the E-score you mentioned, which is you guys score about the metrics of the book. You can kind of make a distinction, or you can kind of make a determination about how long that book is likely to set. I mean, not exact, but it's kind of different than a lot of other, I guess there's other things on Amazon you can do that with as well, given the sales rank and so on. But it's kind of cool that you can make you can sort of look at your inventory in the aggregate and say, well, this group of books is likely to sell somewhere around this period of time frame, and this group is here. I mean, I don't know. Do you look at it that way, or do you just look at it more on a book by book basis?
I do. I really treat my inventory as a portfolio. I'm not treating, I don't have a book in front of me, but I'm not treating every single book as like, hey, I specifically chose this one and I'm going to monitor its progress and reprice it carefully and just love on it. It's just a book. It's a widget, right? So I'm going to have a whole pile of short tail inventory that I'm assuming will sell quickly and give me my money back. I've got a pile of middle of the road inventory that could take 4 weeks to 4 months to sell. And then I've got a pile of long tail inventory that's kind of a shot in the dark. It'll probably sell, 3 to 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. I don't really like to sit on inventory much longer than 9 to 12 months, just because the fees really start to stack up after that.
Right.
So certainly expensive books, I'll keep in inventory at that point, but I do go through, and the way the storage fees work now, where you get charged monthly, you should be going through periodically and just doing spring cleaning, getting rid of old inventory that's not likely to sell again.
Yeah, people in the chat were talking about things they find in books too, which are always interesting. My girlfriend Karen's a big fan of finding money in, well, really anything, but books as well. So, but yeah, you do find all kinds of notes and bookmarks and interesting letters and bills.
We found some interesting cards. I haven't found money yet. I haven't found cash. We find a lot. I found expired checks. Haven't tried to cash those yet. And we find a lot of plane tickets. I guess travelers bring a book on there and use the plane stub as a bookmark, and then donate it and forget about it.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the common mistakes that people make when they're sourcing for books?
There's a lot of them. Probably over or under buying. So maybe not understanding the data before you get out there, and just, for example, if you just start out and you don't have a real good grasp on sales rank, you'll just go buy everything that you can list for, let's say, $12 or $15. You'll get home, you'll have a lot of books that are 8, 10, 12 million sales ranks that are only selling for $12. And those aren't books you should be loading up on. And that's fine. You'll learn from your mistakes, hopefully, if you're tracking your business and understand that, hey, that's not a great way to run it. Another big mistake, I think, is people are really shy starting out, and we were too. You walk into a store with a scanner and you feel like every employee is looking at you. I mean, they don't care. Nowadays, they know what you're doing. 5, 6 years ago, it was not as common as it is today, and it was probably very weird for you to be in there. One of the mistakes people make is network. Talk to people. People are kept to themselves, and if someone goes, "Hey, what are you doing with that scanner thingy?" You go, "Nothing. Just, I'm just doing my research, seeing if it's in my collection." Or you just ignore them. And chatting with people and sharing what you do can really open the door, especially with employees. They go, "Hey, we've got a ton of books in the back that we can't even put on our shelves. Do you want to look at those too?" Well, certainly. So I think if you're going to be in this business, even if you're an introvert, that's okay. Be friendly, be pleasant, chat with the people around you, and who knows what opportunities may open up.
Yeah, Karen and I usually scan as a team, and she has for a while. Her standard response has been, "Oh, it's just the scanner at KDC. Oh, it just helps me find the books I really want."
Yep.
So, which is technically true, but I think now because we were kind of nervous about, not nervous, but I don't know. There's just something weird about it. Some people, have an issue with people reselling things, especially if you're going to like a store that's like a nonprofit or something like that. But I'm like, they're here to sell the things so they can remain in business and help, said nonprofit.
Yeah, they're happy that you're buying their inventory. They listed it for sale at a certain price, and usually the stores don't care. You'll get some people that walk through and kind of get frustrated.
Yeah.
I would give, actually, if you do want to, turn people away nicely, you have to have a decent story that makes sense. If people go, "Hey, what are you doing with that scanner?" and you say, "Nothing," they're going to be really curious. They're like, "Wait a minute, you must be making a ton of money if you're not willing to tell me what you're doing." So if you really want to, if you're reading the situation, if you're in a hurry, you don't really want to have the conversation and then talk about Amazon, that's fine. One thing we used to say is, "What are you doing with that?" "Well, I'm looking it up on Amazon, or I'm looking it up online to see if it's cheaper online." And most people go, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." Now, in reality, you're not going to find books cheaper than $1 or $2 online. And it's technically true, because I am seeing if it's cheaper online. Because if it's cheaper online, I'm not buying it in the store.
That's true.
So if you're looking for a good excuse, that's a decent one to give.
Yeah, I think now though we've moved into we just started telling them, like, we haven't really gotten too many other extra offers of, "Hey, there's more books in the back" or something. But I think that day will come, because you're absolutely right. A lot of people view them as we said earlier, they view books as a nuisance. They just want to get them out of the way. They're heavy, whatever. And if you can help them take any of them off their hands, they're usually more than willing to help you.
Certainly.
So what about any out of the box approaches that maybe you've tried for sourcing books? Like something, I think we all know, all right, I can go to thrift stores, I can go to estate sales, I can go to yard sales. I can, do all those sorts of things, to library sales, the big book sales that go around the country. But what about any other out of the box approaches? Do you have anything that you've tried that would be just a little, something outside of those traditional avenues?
Oh yeah, we've tried a number of things. One, let's do a morality compass gauge. How do you feel about sourcing from little free libraries?
This is going to be the end of my channel. Thanks, Caleb.
This can be a touchy subject for some people.
Yeah, we have a couple of those here in Charlotte, and we did consider it, but we decided not to do it because just for various reasons. But
yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that. I know some people are really outspoken against it, and some people really find great inventory. If you're going to do it, I would leave it better than you found it, tidy it up. Right. If you're going to leave 2 books for every book that you're taking, so to speak. Yeah, we won't go there. A couple interesting ways to source. One would be setting up like Craigslist notifications. So you can go to Craigslist. You don't even need extra software for this. You can use if this then that, ifttt.com. That's a good option. But Craigslist actually has a built-in search option. So for me, I'm in Denver. I'm also in Indiana from time to time. And you can go into your local Craigslist and actually set up alerts for church rummage and textbooks and books and wholesale books and auction books, and set up all kinds of keywords. And then essentially you'll have your inbox loading up with prospective ways to find books. And that can lead you to find storage units full of books. And a lot of times these guys just want them gone. If you say, hey, I'll come get everything out of storage, or I'll start paying the storage instead of you paying it, sometimes you can pick up the books for free. Or, I've paid several thousand for storage units before if it makes sense to do so. So kind of turning your inbox into a way to source for books without having to go look all the time can be pretty good. You can do the same thing with like a Facebook marketplace, looking for textbooks. One interesting thing we've tried, we actually did a book drive in the community. So you think we actually went to a local school, and they actually approached us, some friends from church. They knew that we were booksellers, and they said, hey, we've got an idea. We want to run it by you. They said, hey, we're trying to do a fundraiser. Typically we sell candy bars, and half the money goes back to the candy bar company, and you're trying to go around the neighborhood and sell candy bars to people that are just trying to get the kid to go away. And they said, rather than selling something this year, we want to try and do something just out of the box. And they thought of us, and we ended up partnering together. So we actually did a book drive for each class. It was like a middle school and some elementary classes as well. So they had the kids go around and just bring books from their houses into their classroom. And they tracked the number of books that were brought in. The lady that ran it was phenomenal. She did a great job tracking everything. We actually set her up with a subscription to ScoutIQ and used the stock triggers that come with it. She scanned all the books that came in. Anything that turned green, she set aside. And then we actually went in and sold them on consignment, and we split profits 50-50. So that's been a pretty good opportunity. So one, help the school. Two, they didn't have to go sell anything. They were actually going door to door and asking for books that were laying around, and actually doing the community a service to pick up those books. And then we were able to sell some online. And third, they actually ran a community book sale after that, and sold everything for $1 and $2, and eventually dumped everything off at Goodwill on the way out. So that was sort of an interesting experiment. We just did it once so far. We may try and ramp it up and do it multiple times. But that was kind of a good way to, it was a lot of effort, I would say, up front, but it was a good way to help the community and get free inventory.
Yeah, that's great. And I like the fact that, you provide a solution for you and your business, and also for the school. So, I mean, you don't have to, I think we forget sometimes in this community that, it's not always a one-sided relationship. You can find ways to help, all parties involved. And books is definitely one, because like we said, sometimes people see them as, not such a valuable commodity like booksellers do.
Yep.
So,
yeah, exactly.
All right. So I'm gonna tell you, we're gonna switch gears here a little bit, and thank all you guys for watching. We've had about 80 people watching. So if you're enjoying the content, please hit the like button, and lets me know I'm doing a good job. Lets YouTube know as well. And we definitely will take some questions, so just hang on to those a little bit. But I just want to walk through, because Caleb brought this up right before we went live. I just want to walk through some of the things that we've been doing, and are now, I guess we're about 2.5 months into this book journey that we've started. And I've sold on Amazon before, but I haven't really sold too many books. I certainly didn't have, any scanner, any sort of app, anything. I was just out there winging it with the Amazon Seller app. And I thought I would share like a couple of things that we've been doing and kind of get your take on it, Caleb. And hopefully that maybe will be, educational for everybody else watching. I know it will be for me, so I have a selfish, self-motivated reason here. But
Sure.
Just in general, just to kind of talk you through a little bit what we've been doing. And like I said, guys, we will definitely have questions and so on. So just hang on to those. All right. So I also am a spreadsheet junkie like you. And people watching this channel know that for sure. And, I always want to think about anything new I get into in terms of, analyzing the data and so on. But as you probably are well aware, one of the challenges when you start a new venture and you start inputting data and tracking things, at first you're kind of tracking too many things. Like you're kind of tracking everything, and it's hard to get it down to just what you need. So given that sort of setup, how much value do you think it is in the fact that I've created in our sort of workbook, our Excel workbook, a page that shows the locations we've gone to, and then how many days since, I've got a few metrics running beside them, how long since we've sourced them. And my idea with that was just, I don't want to hit them too often or wait too long. How many books we actually pulled at them, kind of what the percentage was and how many scans it took.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you think there's value, at least in the beginning, or maybe even ongoing, in looking at those? I think I have about 80 locations so far that I've gone to, although I went to a couple in Vegas last week, which I'm not going to go back to anytime soon for obvious reasons. But about 80 locations that are within, 75, 80 locations are within driving distance of me. Is there value in like tracking that kind of information when you're, starting book sourcing?
For the average person, maybe not. It may be too much work, especially if you don't enjoy spreadsheets and that's intimidating to you. That's probably going to scare you away from the business. For you, if you got an analytical mind and you're curious and you're curious what's happening there, absolutely track it. You'll start to notice some trends that emerge. There's certain sources you could probably go to every single day and come up with decent results, and other sources don't get replenished, until a week or two. And so you'll actually get a pretty good schedule and you'll optimize your time. Because ultimately, I've watched a little bit of your channel. I know you're talking more about trying to maximize your dollars per book rather than the ROI. Because you could spend $1 in books, make $2, and brag to your friends that you made 200% ROI, but that was only $2. Right. So you actually want to try and maximize your books per source or your dollars per source. And the 80-20 rule is certainly going to apply. If you've got 80 sources, the majority of your good books are probably going to come from 16 of your sources, 16 to 20 of your sources. That's just the way it is. And if you can hone that in, that allows you to do a couple things. One, if you really want to start, let's say you want to move away from books, but you say, hey, this is great, I want to keep this as an income stream. You can then focus on the very few sources that are returning the majority of your time, as well as you're going to maximize your time sourcing. Because if half your sources only get replenished every other week, you don't want to go there twice a week. It's not worth your time. So I think it's fantastic. And if you have the ability to track that and understand which sources are good and how often you should go there, that's knowledge is power. That's really certainly going to help you.
No, that's great. And I like what you said about the 80-20 rule. I hadn't even thought of that way, just having to be 80 locations, but you're exactly right. So that's one of the things, that I was curious about, was just if we were, again, going back to what's important and what's not. That's always tricky, I think, when you're in this game, any game, book sourcing or what have you. All right, so let's talk about profitability. And this goes back to the time argument too. So you have a program called ScoutIQ, an app which you can use for Android and iPhone. And it allows you to scan the book, and with a preset set of triggers and so on, it will tell you, given things like the rank, how quickly the book is selling, how many sellers are on the listing, whether or not you should pick up the book or not. Is that a fair representation?
Yeah, it comes preloaded out of the box. It's not exactly the guidelines I use or the triggers I use, but it's pretty close. Mm-hmm. So like those rules I mentioned early on, if it's selling a lot, I'm okay with a small profit level. If it's selling a medium amount, I want slightly higher profit. And if it's selling, not very often, I need a high threshold. it comes preloaded with that. And, you know, a lot of booksellers that are brand new, their feedback, they come back to us is, hey, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what I'm doing, but the app told me to accept it, and they're going and building pretty significant businesses. And then they eventually learn, and we want to teach them the data, but it's overwhelming at first. You're trying to figure out how to source, how to talk to people and interact with people that are sourcing, what equipment you need, how to read the data, how to list the books, how to reprice the books, how to manage sales, how to manage returns. It's not that complex at the end of the day, but if you're brand new, it's going to take you a month or 2 or 3 to really get up to speed.
No, and I love it because I love the fact that I can go through and source or scan, 500 books or 600 books in an hour along with a Bluetooth scanner and this app. And I couldn't do that in previous niches of things I was selling. Like even as good as I got at jeans, 500 an hour would be crazy amount to try to go through and actually make good decisions. So it does streamline that. My question comes into with the profitability part, like this goes back to what the value of the time is worth. I mean, is there a model, and I don't know where we fall on this, Karn and I, because I'm treating Karn and I as if we were paid book scouts, because that is something we may down the road do. So we're trying to figure out, what sort of makes sense to sort of earn per book. Now, obviously, there's the ones that sell quicker versus the ones that don't sell quite as quick per book to make sort of, the time worth it. And I don't know that there's like a set dollar amount for that, but I just kind of was curious, like your thoughts on it. Like, if you're treating your time like I hate to say this, like you're employed by your own business here to go out and source books, what should it be worth on a per book basis? Like what's kind of the minimums, or is the question too complex for that?
No. It's certainly a question worth asking. I'll share a little bit of our experience, and then we'll try and answer the question for the audience. We ran the 80-20 analysis. We track everything. And let me give just a bit of a background. So a couple years ago, probably 3 years ago, the fee structure was a little bit different on FBA. Back then, you could sell an $8 FBA book, and Amazon would pay you roughly $4. So it was about 50% in fees. A $10 book netted you just over $5. Nowadays, a $10 book will get you closer to $3 to $4, depending on how heavy it is. The weight didn't factor in as much a couple years back. So an $8 book netted you $4. So our rule was, the good ranked books, a couple 100,000 sales rank, we're okay selling something for $8. Well, then what we started doing is we started creeping down. We go, well, if it's a really good rank, like 80,000 and it's $795, we'll go ahead and get it. Or if it's 10,000 and it's $780, and we started creeping down, we eventually started getting, buying books that were $6 and $7 because, hey, we're spending $1, but we're going to make $2. It has to be worth it, right? We can process books really quickly. Well, we went back and crunched the numbers, and it turned out that any book that was less than $8 at the time we listed it, and we list up front, we don't use a repricer to handle the initial pricing. We do that manually. And it turns out that books that were listed for under $8 were 20% of our inventory. So 1/5 of our books were books that we listed for under $8. And we looked at our overall profit. That accounted at the time for, it was like 4% of our overall profit. So we were spending a fifth of our time, or if you want to break it into weekdays, 1 day a week of our time to only make 4% of our overall profit. So we looked at the numbers and said, you know what? I like making $3 and $4 at a time, but the data shows us, because you're not going to sell all the books. Some of the books are going to drop in price. And so we started looking at that data and said, you know what? We need to cut those out. So we raised our floor price up to $10. And about 6 months later, we reran the analysis, and the same thing held true. And partly, no matter where you set your threshold, it's going to be similar. But we just started saying, hey, I'd rather work less and make roughly the same amount of money. So for example, if you're working every day a week, you could theoretically cut 1 day out, and you hardly would notice it on your bottom line. So for us, we made that rule and said, hey, we're not going to waste our time sourcing cheap books. We're going to try and maximize our time and only look for more expensive ones. Now, it's a little bit hard on your emotions, on your psyche, because you used to walk out of a thrift store with 40 books, and now you're walking out with 25. And you're going, the cart's not as full, the bags aren't as heavy, you're not spending as much money, you don't get the glamour shots for Instagram, but you're running a more efficient, lean operation. And if it's just you in the operation, or just you and your girlfriends, then you better figure out how to maximize your time. And that's one way to do it. So that's our experience. To put an actual number on it, it really depends on where you are, how much you're paying for books, what your goals are. But I would say if you can't make at least $1 a book by the time you've sourced it and gone home and listed it and labeled it, thrown it in a box and paid for shipping, you probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I like that you broke it down in a way where you made sure that people understood you could walk out with less, but you're making more profit and you're going to spend, you're spending less, to make sort of like more profitable decisions. Because we forget that when we go in these stores or we go to a location, we think, I got to come out with a ton of stuff, because I fall guilty of that too. Because I'm like, well, I'm here. There's an opportunity cost to me being here, because I can't be somewhere else because I'm here. So maybe I should try to maximize what I get, because the time to go somewhere else, is time that I'm not sourcing, and it's not profitable time. So should I give up profit here because I'm here versus spending that time to go somewhere else or, another day? Does that make sense?
It does. The hard part about it is you pick up a book, you scan it, it says I'm going to make 75 cents profit. And you're like, well, I've already picked up the book. I've already analyzed it. I'm sitting here, right? I might as well throw it in my cart. A really good way to do this is actually go stress test your business. Go on the road, jump in your car. Did you guys fly out to Vegas or drive out there?
We flew out.
Okay, good life decision. So you bought a bunch of books there and you listed them from Vegas?
Yeah, about 100. We bought about 100 there and shipped them in from Vegas.
So you prepped them from a hotel room or an Airbnb?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great way to stress test your business, because what'll happen is you get excited, you go buy a ton of inventory, you get back to the hotel room at night and you're like, I'm in Vegas. I should be going enjoying Vegas and playing slots and poker and blackjack and or watching a show or whatever you do in Vegas. And now you're sitting there in front of Netflix in the hotel room, painstakingly going through 100 books and trying to get them listed. And so when you do that enough times, and we've done a number of road trip adventures from the road, and once you start doing that, you quickly realize, you know what? I'd rather find the 50 correct books rather than 100 okay books.
Right.
And so that's a good way to do it, because you can fall victim to going, well, it's 75 cents. I've already scanned it. I've already done the research. It won't take me that long to list it, and understand that. And if you're really numbers oriented, go ahead and track everything. Track how long does it take you to actually, from the moment you get home, how long does it take you to prep? If you're going to clean it, list it, label it, ship it, and do 100 books, and then figure out how much time is involved and assign yourself a dollar value. I think it's really important to say, hey, my time is worth $30 an hour or $50 an hour. And if you can't really justify that from, if you're only getting 50 cents of profit and it takes you a minute to handle the book, that's probably still worth it, but it depends on what sort of value you assign your time.
Right, absolutely. Let's talk about fees.
Oh, fees. Let's go there.
The favorite topic of every reseller, fees. Well, I'm talking about our experience. So July was our second full month sourcing books for Amazon. We started kind of in the middle of May, and then I had a couple issues with getting some shipments to get recognized by Amazon. And then, so really June and July have been the first 2 full months. Now, a couple caveats there. We weren't able to source for about 10 days of June because we were out with a friend of ours, an Amazon seller, buying up all the crap at Toys R Us all over the Southeast. That was another story. But basically, we've had roughly 2 full months. Now, I have been in the scaling up part, or the scaling up mindset of this business. But is it perfectly normal in the first 2 months, as I've seen, between the subscriptions I have for, Accelerlist and ScoutIQ, Amazon's shipment fees, printing shipping labels, their selling fees, that after those 2 months, I'm pretty much break even. I mean, I haven't really made or lost a ton of money. Now, I have pushed my inventory from 0 up to over 800, which, is not
awesome.
It's pretty good. And I've sold, I guess, I'd have to look at today, probably about 145, 150 books, somewhere in that time. But I mean, is that kind of a common experience? Because I've been sharing this book journey, Kayla, with people and been very transparent with the numbers. I'm going to do a video for July's results. I just haven't gotten to it yet. But I know there's going to be somebody in the comments who's going to go, wait, you spent 2 months doing something, and basically broke even on it. You know, is that realistic? Is that just the way it has to go if you're going to scale this business up?
I mean, most businesses don't make money for several years, and a lot of businesses go out of business within the first year or two. So to be breaking even and doing okay within 2 months is actually pretty good. You know, a lot of businesses
I feel a little better now.
And again, this business is wonderful because there's no overhead. You're not getting, for most people, you're not getting lease. Let's say you're starting a restaurant. You don't have to buy all the equipment and the refrigerators and pots and pans and, you know, whatever. You don't have to buy all the general equipment. You don't have to pay for lease or rent or buy a store or a building. You can start with a cell phone. You don't even need software, to be honest. You can use the Amazon Seller app to get started. It's not speedy, it's not efficient, but it's cheap. And if you're on a budget and you have more time than money, go for free. You can get started with literally an Amazon account, which you can get a free account, or you can pay the $40 a month, and there's very little overhead. So it's not hard to break even, but yeah, if you're dumping inventory, if you're buying money, you're spending money on books, if you're sending into FBA, you've got to pay for all the shipping to get it to Amazon. You're going to dig a little bit of a hole. And, you know, again, most businesses, if you could tell them, yeah, you'll break even in 2 months, the owners would be thrilled.
Well, it's going to be really interesting because this whole month of August, we're leaving Monday to go on another super secret shopping trip. And we're going to be gone the whole month of August. We won't be back till Labor Day. So I don't even know if I'll be able to source any books. Honestly, while we're gone, we're going to be working about 6 days a week. So it's going to be kind of tough to find much time to do anything. So it'll be kind of interesting to see, like, I'm not sending any books in. There's no extra overhead or time, just to kind of see over this next month, you know, what sells. And I have a repricer as well, because I just, you know, I realized I didn't want to, once it got to a point, I'm like, this is just too much time. I cannot be in here looking at these prices every single day. It's driving me nuts. I need something to go in and say, you know, higher, lower, keep it the same. So, all right, I feel a little better now. You've talked me down off the break-even ledge. It really wasn't a ledge, but I know there's people who would say that. They'd say, like, you know, it's really hard to justify, but you have to ramp it up. You know, I mean, I think any business is that way. Like, you know, you have to kind of pay your dues those first 3 months, 6 months, whatever the time frame is.
You do, and you're going to make mistakes. Everybody will, no matter how much you research or if you just jump right in or you're really methodical. Either way, you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Again, with books, you're not spending $10,000 on a wholesale order or trying to get some samples in from China. You're spending a couple bucks at a thrift store, or you're starting with books that are already in your house. So the barrier to entry, the cost of entry is very low. And for sure, when you're in the startup phase and you're very early on, the first month or 2 or 3, just test things, learn, figure out the process, figure out how to streamline it, figure out what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. And then from there, really start to dig in. I think too many people trying to optimize their businesses really early on. I just saw a story, and the numbers are way off. I didn't actually write them down, but Southwest had their, of course, they just made news because they're pulling peanuts off the planes altogether, which is, I can't believe they haven't done that earlier because of all the peanut allergies. But at any rate, they had their supplier redo the packaging and actually cut like 2 peanuts out per package. And that sounds like something small and trivial. Most customers aren't going to notice.
Yeah.
But Southwest, and again, I don't know the number offhand. Someone can, maybe I'll Google it while we're chatting. But I think they saved something like $2.3 million in 1 year by shaving 2 peanuts off of every bag of peanuts that they gave away.
Wow.
So for them, because they're already at scale, optimizing makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Now, if you're a brand new airline, you have 3 flights a month, and you go, hey, I've got this brilliant idea. I'm going to try and figure out how to save, 2 peanuts out of each bag. Great. You're going to save $6 for the year. It's not worth it. So don't worry about optimizing the business early on. Don't be stupid with it either, but focus on scaling it. Can you get to the point? You've got 800 books right now. Try and get to 2,000 books or 3,000 books, and then really step back, look at what you're doing. What are you good at? What's working, what's not, and then try and optimize from there. So there's very different stages to your business. And right now you're in the, you kind of went through the startup phase, you're breaking even, you at least know what you're doing. Now it's time to scale up. And then at some point it'll be time to say, hey, am I just going to keep doing this myself and keep this as my own job? Or am I going to find a way to step back and hire somebody else to handle pieces of it?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I'm just such a nerd when it comes to like wanting to have all the toys at once, that not even the toys, but things that find value. I don't have all the toys. Let's be clear. Somebody's going to say that.
Some of the toys.
Somebody's going to say, they're going to be like, yeah, you get all this. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't really have I don't have double-digit subscriptions anymore. So let's take a few questions too. So if you guys have questions, type them in the chat. Of course, you're welcome to leave a question after the video post and so on. And I'm sure I've already missed some. So if you did have a question earlier, please repost it. I know this one was from Mark Corbett, who wanted to ask, do you see that many booksellers are going to go the fulfilled by merchant route instead of FBA due to all the changes?
You know, I always hear that every time the changes happen, people start going, oh, I'm going to go merchant fulfilled. I can't justify the fees. And then you come back a couple months later and you go, hey, how many of you actually went merchant fulfilled? And you know, most of them kind of go, I didn't. Merchant fulfilled is a lot of work. And it certainly makes sense. I know a lot of the bigger sellers, most of them are merchant fulfilled anyway, but some of them, they went backwards. And I'm trying to look up the Southwest thing while we're chatting. It's not working, so I'll stop.
The peanut story.
They sold 106, or they gave away 106 million packages of peanuts 2 years ago. So I don't know how much 2 peanuts cost times 106 million, but anyway. Sorry about that. I was getting distracted. Yeah, certainly people say, hey, I'm going to go merchant fulfilled. And then they get into it and realize the effort involved and go, it's probably not worth it. And they go back to FBA. For me, FBA is a convenience play. I spend time in Colorado and Indiana on the road traveling. And so I don't want to have to manage a single location and deal with shipping orders. And I don't really want the overhead of a ton of employees doing that as well. Now, we've done that from time to time, but I'm pretty much going to be an FBA play because of the convenience. Now, if you have a warehouse, if you're at home all the time, if you don't mind picking orders, there's certainly a lot of books that make sense to sell merchant fulfilled. For example, the long tail books, rather than sending them in and sitting for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, and waiting on, paying the fees until they may or may not sell, that may make sense to have a long tail shelf at home or a long tail garage with 1,000 books that may pay out. There's a lot of books that, for example, Amazon sells for $12 or $13, and that's your ceiling. The rank is really good, and merchant fulfilled prices and FBA prices are both right there at $11. You're certainly going to make more money if you sell it merchant fulfilled because there's no prime bump on those books because there can't be. So there are some books that make sense, and certainly if you really want to optimize for profits, you'll find a way to actually do merchant fulfilled. But I'd rather find my time, spend my time golfing or buying more books or partnering with people or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and one thing people need to remember, and I think you would agree with this, Caleb, is that if you decide, and I'm not trying to tell you you should sell merchant fulfilled or FBA, you have to do whatever makes sense. But if you do decide to go the merchant fulfilled route, you're giving up some things, and you're going to need some things that you don't need with FBA and vice versa. I mean, you are going to need the space. You're going to need the system. You're going to need a system to pull the books and ship the books. You're going to need packing supplies. You're going to need to handle the customer service. You're going to need to directly handle the returns. I mean, those are the things that Amazon FBA gives you. Amazon FBA does have costs and expenses and fees because they're providing you something for it. Now you can argue whether it's too much or too little. That's a whole nother argument. But it's not as if people get so focused on just the money part, they forget about the process and the time part, because that has a real cost. If you have to stay home an extra hour a week from your job, that costs you your hourly rate. If you have to have a spare bedroom, whereas before you were in a 2-bedroom house and now you need a 3rd bedroom for your 3,000 book collection, that costs you money. So all these things, you have to kind of take all those things into account, right? I mean, it's not just the money aspect of FBA. For
sure. And one thing to point out, we're saying, hey, it's way cheaper to sell merchant fulfilled. Yes and no. You're right. You have to factor in those things. The fees on Amazon are the same in books. So the fees are $1.80 per book, 15% of the sales price, and that includes shipping if you're merchant fulfilled. FBA, it's always free shipping. And the only differential is Amazon is going to charge you a FBA outbound fee. It used to be a pick, pack, and ship. Now it's just an outbound fee. They've kind of lumped it together. And that's going to run you anywhere from $4 to $6 or $7, depending on the weight of the book. Right. So you're going to save that if you go merchant fulfilled. However, when you sell Prime, not always, but oftentimes you can get a Prime bump. You can sell it for more money. There's less competition because fewer people sell Prime. And there's a lot of other things that open up as well. Right. Now, if you're doing the bulk approach, there's a lot of books that you can sell merchant fulfilled and still make 50 cents where you couldn't sell at FBA and make any money. So depending on your business model, that may be that may be something you have to consider.
And if you do bulk, God bless you.
And I'll just go on record and say, you know what? I am happy to pay Amazon's fees. And yes, they change every year, and they're never going down. They're almost always just going to keep going up. But the sheer volume of people that are out there buying books, my business exists because Amazon is there. And some people may say, well, that's silly. You're relying on Amazon, and if they change things or cut you off their platform, that's too risky. Sure, I acknowledge that risk, but I'm willing to play in their sandbox because they have tremendous amounts of traffic.
Right.
And you know what? Go ahead and sell your books on Craigslist Marketplace and Facebook Marketplace and deal with all the, going back and forth and trying to find times and places to meet up. There's no fees that way. You can sell it for free.
Sure.
But I'd rather pay the fees and get access to all that customer. It's like paying to fish in a stocked pond. You know you're going to catch something. That's
a good analogy. I like that. There's a couple other questions that came in here too. Thrifty Santa, how are you? I think I know who that is. What led you to pick the Bluetooth scanner you're using? Pros and cons of lesser price scanners. We're using the KDC200, and I don't know. I just saw the reviews, or not reviews. I just saw people talking about that, or the Opticon. I don't have experience with the Opticon. The KDC overall has been pretty good. Mine's got a little quirk in it that. Caleb, this is the craziest thing. We're going to have to talk about this offline. He's got the Opticon.
Yeah, they're about the same. I've played with all of them just so I'm experienced and understand what they are. Yeah. You can get a socket scanner. Probably one of the cheapest ones is the EYOYO. It's like a $40 scanner. It's pretty cheap. It does get the job done. It's a little more bulky and clunky. I mean, this thing is durable. I've had it for years, and it's still ticking like a champ. So it's doing great. It's about the size of a 9-volt battery. It's like the whole argument between iPhone and Android. Some people love one, some people love the other. They all get the job done, but you do get what you pay for. These will run you about $100-$150, whereas the EYOYO is maybe $40. So if you're on a budget and want a Bluetooth scanner, get a cheap one, and when you can afford it, upgrade.
John asked, what do you take with you on the road to print labels? What do you use for a ship from address on the road? True story here. I got flagged by TSA for my DYMO label printer.
I've never been flagged from it.
Well, they couldn't figure out what it was. And they're like, you need to pull that out of your bag. And I'm like, I just didn't even think about it. It's like they pulled it out, put the little stuff on to make sure it didn't have explosive residue. But I mean, you can go around the road and you can use the address. I don't know if it's what you do, but you can use the address of the UPS store or FedEx if you drop FedEx, whichever those are, right?
Yeah, just pick an address. I mean, how does Amazon know where you're at? You could still use your house address. You'll get different shipping rates, and your shipment will, if you do FBA, if you're, for example, in Vegas, most of your stuff will probably get shipped off to California, versus you in Charlotte, most of your stuff is going to Charlotte probably. I bring a DYMO with me. I don't bring a regular printer. You can use your hotel's printer. You can use Staples. You can print for free, or 10 cents, 15 cents. UPS store, you can print there. So I do the regular labels somewhere else, and I print the FBA labels with a DYMO. Or if I'm really in a pinch and don't want to drag it, I'll just pay Amazon to label it. It's not what I do normally, but if you don't want to lug that around with you, travel lightly. Just bring a computer, list your books, throw them in a box, and off you go.
Yeah, we went to Vegas, and we were planning to do a book shipment, and we did. We sourced 2 Savers and 1 Goodwill, and found 102 books. We had to put back like 3 because we were stupid. So we shipped 99, and it wasn't super easy, only because, you got to think about these little logistics. I mean, we had to fly there, so we just had to carry on. We couldn't bring too much with us. We did bring the DYMO. We had to buy a few boxes from Lowe's, whatever, which are pretty easy. But just the only tricky thing was getting the 2D barcode on the boxes, because we were staying with someone who's an Amazon seller, and they didn't want us on their Wi-Fi. So which kind of makes sense, because sometimes Amazon's funny about seeing 2 different seller accounts in the same IP.
You know what? I don't buy that argument. I've heard that, but if you go to a Amazon selling convention, everybody's in the hotel on the same Wi-Fi.
The same one. Yeah.
What they do track is your MAC address, which is your computer's ID. So it's not the IP address of your Wi-Fi; it's the actual landline or land address of your computer. So don't log into your Amazon account on someone else's computer that's also a seller. But as far as using their Wi-Fi, I've never heard of anybody actually getting in trouble for that.
Yeah, we didn't do it, but that's interesting. That actually makes more sense. What you just said about
So
like if you logged in on their computer, right? Because they would think that. So just you got to plan for it. Papa at Fine says, are there times of the year when thrift stores run dry with profitable books? I wouldn't know. I've only been doing this for 2 months. So Caleb, what say you?
times of the year, probably not. Books are going to be somewhat seasonal in that people are going to dump them in the spring when they're doing spring cleaning. When it's garage sale season, all the leftovers are going to get thrown in. So thrift stores are certainly going to get swamped in the spring, probably in the new year as well, as people make resolutions to clean up and tidy up around the house. But in general, books are kind of always flowing in, and thrift stores have more of them than they can handle. You're more likely to run into a dry spell if someone else beat you to the source. So if you're going every Tuesday, for example, and another seller is on that same store rotation on a Monday, they're probably beating you to most of the good stuff. So like I love your idea, Jason, of tracking your sources and what days you go and how long you go in between, and start to look for trends. Am I getting better books on certain days? And that's why it pays too to talk to the staff. Talk to someone that's putting books out and say, hey, how often do you guys put new books out?
Right.
Just ask the questions. A lot of times they'll use a color-coded system for each week. This week is yellow, last week was red, the week before was green. But ask them. Some of them put out books every Friday morning. Most of them put out some new books every day. But try and learn their schedules, their rotations, and try and adjust your schedules accordingly.
Yeah, and and along those lines, we talked about this with our Vegas trip. Look for their special deals. We scanned and bought about 40 books in the first Savers we went into, and didn't even realize that all the books were half price that day. Because it's like, so we for sure put some back we would have gotten had we known.
Sure.
They were right on the threshold. And it's like, well, all right, so it pays to read if there's any specials or deals. You can sign up for any programs or get any points or anything wherever you're going in a chain like that. Read the signs. They actually give you information. Somebody else had another question. Does Caleb see, this is from Mike Kelly, does Caleb see any evidence the bookmarks are becoming less competitive or sellers are leaving due to the fee changes?
So we actually monitored the book market nearly every month in 2017. You can actually go to my website, thebookflipper.com, and you can look at, just type 2017 or book market analysis or something into the search bar. And we actually went back and looked at it every month and said, on average, for every book ranked under 1 million, so we just took a giant cross-section of books, how many item listings are there? What's the average sales price? And we actually tracked that over time. And we saw that the number of sellers got smaller, or the number of units per listing, which kind of correlates to the number of sellers. So the number of sellers got less and fewer, and the prices went up. And I haven't tracked that much in 2018. We can probably go back and redo it. So empirical data, no, I don't have any that's recent that would suggest that. There's always people leaving the market. There's always people coming into the market. That's just the nature of book selling and the nature of e-commerce.
Yeah, we tend, and we talk about this on the channel from time to time. A lot of us tend to walk around with confirmation bias. We tend to see the evidence that supports what we think and ignore the evidence that's to the contrary.
Totally.
And you really have to look back with an objective eye at things like that. But those sorts of changes tend to happen over a long period of time. A lot of times, like a market, it's rare that a market changes like overnight. It can change a little, but sometimes there's an equilibrium where people leave or come in, and then they sort of go the opposite way after they figure out it's not really what they're going to do.
Yeah, and a good way to look at that too is when you're traveling. And so a good example of that, someone asks you as you're sitting next to them on the plane, hey, what do you do for a living? Well, I sell stuff on Amazon. And the majority of people don't go, oh yeah, that's really cool, I've heard of that. They just look at you and go, that's a thing. Most people assume that when they buy a Prime item from Amazon, that it's coming from Amazon. Like right. Amazon is physically handing you that item. They don't realize that it's third-party sellers. So right. We get stuck in the weeds in our market. You see all the YouTube sellers and all the gurus and experts and everybody, telling you this is how to sell. And you go, man, everybody's doing it. I'm too late. Go talk to people outside of our bubble, and you'll realize that we're still very much early.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was at the eBay Open this past weekend in Vegas. It might have been the CEO who said in his presentation something on the lines, I'm probably going to get the numbers wrong, that the online marketplace as a share of retail sales is still only around like 18% or something like that. And they predict that over the next 5-10 years it'll grow to at least 50, if not beyond. So there's still room for a huge amount of growth in these markets. We forget that. There's other parts of the world too that, are still, potentially years behind, the US or Canada and so on in terms of its integration of their markets. So don't get scared that just because something changes, a little bit here or there, that suddenly the sky is falling.
Well, and try it too. Just because you think the market's going to go one way or the other, get in and try it. Again, there's not much cost to get started. So try the book market. If it works for you, if you've got good sources in your area, if you can figure it out, have at it. If it doesn't work for you and you find other niches that work, go to that direction too. Don't just listen to us saying the market's great or the market's terrible. There's tons of people saying the sky is falling, and some of them are just naysayers in general. And some of them actually are selling and selling very profitably and just saying that to get people away. But there is room for a lot of sellers. There's probably tens of thousands of booksellers across the US alone.
Right.
So.
Let's take one or two more questions because I want to be respectful of your time, Caleb. We're right at the top of the hour. But someone had asked about, this is just sort of more of a nuts and bolts kind of question. Any tips for getting musty basement smells out of books?
Throw the book away.
Yeah, I like that. Don't pick it up.
I mean, what's your time worth? If it's a really expensive book, sure. There's some YouTube videos. There's some powders and stuff you can buy and put the book in like an enclosed environment, like a Ziploc bag or something. And there's ways you can actually sort of demust, if that's a word, demust the book. For me, $5 book, $10 book, $20 book, it's not worth the time for me to figure out how to do it. I'm throwing the book away and trying again.
Yeah. I got a textbook like that unfortunately I bought locally for $25 because it sells for about $90 during the season, but it's got cigarette smoke smell, and I'm like, so I'm like, I got to figure out how to get that one out of that one because I'm like, that's kind of worth selling. But it's all through it too. It's like the worst. I'm just sitting there. It's been sitting there for like 2 months in the warehouse. I haven't figured out how to get it out. There was one other question I was gonna catch, but if I can't, that's okay. I don't know where it went. I probably lost it here. Okay. But anyway, all right. Well, listen, guys, we're at the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of Caleb's time. So, Caleb, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? I know ScoutIQ has its own website. I know you have a website too that you have. But what kind of ways, if people want to get a hold of you to learn more about ScoutIQ or to learn more about book flipping, where should they go? And I'll post it in the notes after we're done with this video as well.
Cool. Don't post my email address there, but if people are actually listening and pay attention to it, you can hit me up at thebookflipper@gmail.com. So if you want to reach out, I respond to everything personally. At this point, someday I'll hire a virtual assistant or a personal assistant, but it's still me. You can read more at thebookflipper.com. That's my blog. And you can find us on Facebook, the Book Flipper Community, and on YouTube, the Book Flipper Community. So lots of ways to find us. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the things. I'm not really a Snapchat guy. Don't bother going there. And if you're ever in the Denver or Warsaw, Indiana areas, look me up, reach out and say, hey, I like to connect with other sellers and grab a beer, coffee, or play golf. So if you want to chat books and business and Amazon, I love all those things. And I'm usually happy to meet up.
Cool. Thank you so much for coming on, Caleb. Tons of great info in this. If you guys are just now logging on, be sure you scroll back and watch this video after it posts and so on, because there's tons of questions that we answered and tons of info that we gave out just sort of, throughout the show. And again, Caleb, thank you so much for coming on and doing this. Really, really appreciate it. Make sure you check out Caleb and all those places he just mentioned as well.
Perfect. Thanks for having me, Jason. And thanks to everybody who's watching, and have a great week ahead.
Thanks, guys. I will see you guys soon. And as always, this is Prof Sales saying good sales to you.